In this lecture, we're going to see how to work with grouped properties. Here we have a few examples of QML components. These are the components we have actually worked with in a few previous lectures. We have a defender component, we have a striker component. In this lecture, we are adding another property which is called the player details, and we are exposing this as a grouped property. If you have worked with things like the font, the border, these are grouped properties. You can specify the font color, you can specify the font size. There are three main syntaxes you can use for grouped properties. The first one is the one you see here. You see details, you have your braces here, and inside you have your properties separated by semicolons. The second syntax is this one. It really is like the first one, but you are separating everything on different lines. And the third one is the most flexible one, but it is very easy to make your code messy by doing things like this. You basically say the name of the property, you put a dot, and you put a child property, and then you specify the value for that, just like this. We're going to see how to build this in your C++ code and expose this to be usable in QML, just like we see here. We're going to go to Qt Creator and do that. Here we are in Qt Creator. We're going to create our new project. It's going to be a Qt Quick application. It's going to be called Grouped Properties Demo. Save it in a location on your drive. Choose the Qt version you have installed. We choose our kit and finish. This is going to build on top of what we had before. So we are going to the last project we did for inherited types. We go where it is stored by clicking on the main file, showing Explorer. We are going to copy everything in here from defender to player. We're also going to add striker. We copy everything, we close this, and we come back to our project. Let's close the QML file. We're going to go where the main CPP file is stored. The same thing we did before, really. We're going to paste in everything. Main CPP is going to be overridden. Main QML is going to be overridden. We're going to close this. When we come back to Qt Creator, we see that main has changed and main QML has changed. The next thing we want to do is to add the files that we just added to the project. We're going to select them one by one, player, player, striker, striker. This should be okay now. Let's clean the project. Run QMake and rebuild. Looks like we have a clean build here. Let's run to see that it works as it should, and we have our list of 4 players here. We want to add a class that is going to wrap around the properties that we want to expose as a group. We're going to call it player details because it's going to contain more information about the player. It's going to inherit Q object as usual. We want to give it a few properties, Control A, Control I to align. The first one is going to be the height, the weight, and the speed of the player. They are going to be real values, QReals. We want to generate the methods for these properties. This is something you know by now. Let's generate for the last one. We're going to copy these things and make them available in the private section of the class. Control A, Control I to align. We want to move the methods to the CPP file. Let's refactor and move to CPP for everything. Refactor, move to CPP. Refactor, move to CPP. Refactor, move to CPP, refactor, move to CPP again. We want to take these slots and make them available as public methods, because this is the habit I have of doing things like this. You can leave them as public slots if you want. Let's clean this up a little bit. And you may not believe it, but this is really all you have to do to make your property available as a grouped property. You take your properties that you want to put inside and you put them in a class that you expose like this. All we have to do now is to go to the player class and include player details. And we want to provide the property of player details. We should do that like this property. It's going to be a player details pointer. It's going to be called details. We're going to hit enter because this is what we want, but we don't need a setter for this. We want to generate the methods for this. Refactor, generate. You're going to see the details method generated for you. We move it to CPP. Let's go to the header again. And we have our signal here. We don't want this method to be const. And we don't want this signal to have a parameter because we're not going to be using it. Let's go to the CPP file and remove the const keyword here. Let's go to the header file and see how we are storing the player details of ours. It is exposed as a pointer, but I don't want this to be a pointer by default here. I just want this to be on the stack. But the details method, let's follow the symbol and a cursor to get to it, should return the address of this thing now. Because it is not a pointer, it is some variable that we have on the stack. An object, not a variable. Okay, now that we have this in place, the remaining thing really is to go back to the main CPP file, include our player details class. Let's do that here. And we want to register the player details class as a type that we cannot create also. But we are going to use another syntax so that you also see that. We're going to say QML register type. We're going to say the type, and we are going to put an empty parameter list like this. What this does, it also registers your type as a type you cannot create in QML, but you don't get a custom message like this. QML is just going to fail over if you try to instantiate it. If you select this QML register type here and go to the documentation, you're going to be taken to this. This function registers the type in QML system. Instances of this type cannot be created from the QML system. It is just available as a type you can reference, but you cannot create objects of this class. In fact, if you go in QML and try to say player details, you see that it is not even recognized. Let's run QMake just to make sure. And rebuild. Let's look at the compile output. This is taking longer. The build is successful. If we try to run this, we're going to get a message saying that player details is not a type. We are not allowed to instantiate something like this. This is what you get when you register your type like this without specifying anything inside. You get a generic error here that it is not a type you can use. I hope this makes sense. This is the main difference between QML register and create type and QML register type without any parameters in here. They are both uncreatable types. One gives you a nice message to look at. The other gives you this generic message you see here, but the effect is the same, and it is a matter of choice and preference on your part. Now you know that you cannot create this type, but it is available for use in your QML code. We can go to the player here. We're going to say details, and put in our properties in here. I am going to put in a bunch of properties that I had prepared to save on some typing time. And you see that you get an error here. This is just Qt Creator giving you a false positive. If we try to run this, we're going to get our program run without a problem. You shouldn't be thrown off by this error here. We can use the other syntaxes for the other players. Let's pick this defender here and put in the data like this, Control A, Control I to align. It really is the same thing we did here. We're just moving everything to different lines. If we run again, I don't think we're going to have any problem, but Qt Creator is going to throw you off a little bit. We can also go down and use another syntax with dots, Control A, Control I to align. We say details height, details weight, and details speed. But this also is flagged as an error. But if we run the application, we're not going to have any problem. But this must be Qt Creator not recognizing what we have in here. It must be a bug, but I'm not sure. I'm going to close this and close all these applications here and close Qt Creator and open it again. Sometimes some of these errors go away. I can actually close Qt Creator, the entire piece of software. I'm going to save all first, close the Qt Creator software. I have it opened again. I can open my recent project, which should be grouped properties here. Let's go to the QML file and see that some of the errors went away. And yes, here you see the details are recognized. Here, the syntax is fine, no errors, but this is still flagged as an error. This must be a bug in the part of Qt Creator highlighting these things as an error. If you have a way around this, do let me know. I might be interested. Let's run the application again. We see our data here. We are able to assign grouped properties to instances of our class in QML. And before we wrap up this lecture, I want to show you that you can actually read these properties if you want. We can come to the bottom when the component is loaded. Let's comment this out because we don't need it right now. We can try and print the height of the first player in the list of players from team 1. The way we do that, we can say console log team 1 players. We pick the first player, which is going to be at the index 0. We say details and height. If we check that, we're going to see that the first player is player 1. Their height is 333. Let's run. We should have a 333 printed here, and it is what we exactly have. This is all for this lecture. In the next one, we're going to see how to work with attached properties for your C++ types in QML. I'll see you there.